Binge eating. I actually have a little trick that I think will help if that's something that you struggle with. I am speaking from experience. I, at one point in my life, struggled with binge eating. I would experience it as this pressure building up in my body. More often than not, it would start with me pulling out a bag of something rather than serving myself something. So that's just a little, that is not the trick I'm gonna share today, but that is a little trick, is that if you struggle with binge eating, starting with a whole bag of something is not helpful. Whether it was before I grabbed the bag of something or when I actually sat down to eat the bag of something, it would feel like this intense pressure in my body. As soon as I started to eat the food, the pressure dissipated. Because that release of pressure felt so good, the one bite wasn't enough. Then it would just turn into this automatic, not even about how my stomach, like being hungry. And that's actually how I know that binge eating is not about food. You might be hearing that and say like, well, yeah, duh. But when I was struggling with binge eating, I was not aware of that. I thought it was about the food, but it's not about the food. And the way I know how it's not about the food is because I would not eat that food slowly. It was scarf this down as quickly as possible. And hopefully if I eat it super quickly, if I finish off all of this food, then hopefully my shame will go down with it and I won't have to feel it. That of course did not work. So the pressure would dissipate quickly, but then at some point, either mid-binge or at the end of the binge, then that feeling of shame would rise up very, very quickly. What I found is that if it were about the food, I would have been eating it very slowly and enjoying the experience. I would never qualify a binge as an enjoyable experience. It was a compulsive experience. What that means is we need to find a way to bring ourselves into the moment if we struggle with binge eating. And so the trick that I invite you to try is the next time you feel triggered by a food, if you can, stop yourself, take a breath, and then, this is the trick, I want you to schedule when you're gonna eat that food for some time later. Ask yourself, how long can I wait to eat this food? It might only be 5 minutes initially. It might be a couple hours, but I want you to schedule a time when you're gonna come back and actually eat that food and then let yourself do it. You might hear this like, oh, just schedule when you're gonna eat this later on and assume that the goal is to get you to not eat the food at all. But that's not it. In a perfect world, what you would do is say like, oh, I'm getting ready to just like eat all of these cookies or eat this whole pantry or whatever. Stop yourself and say, wait a minute. I'm not gonna do this yet. I can do this, but not yet. Instead, I'm gonna schedule this for tomorrow at the same time. We'll say 5:30 p.m. or whatever time it is. 5:30 p.m. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat these cookies. And I'm going to let myself eat the whole box of cookies if I want to tomorrow. But that's when I'm going to do it. And then honor that. The next day at the time that you have said that you're going to eat that food, go back, serve yourself some of that food, sit down and enjoy it and eat it. The only way I would say not to eat it is if the next day at that time you just authentically do not want it at all. Like if you don't want it, then honor that. But if you're like, no, I would eat it any day, then schedule it, come back and do it. The reason I say this is because binging is not about food. Binge eating is about fear. It's about fear of scarcity. So it might be fear of, I shouldn't have this, or I can't have this, or I don't deserve this, or this is gonna go away, or maybe it's fear of I'm not enough and I can't have enough, like there isn't enough in the world. Some kind of fear is what drives us into that binging mode where we just wanna take as much as we can get and swallow it, right? And so the reason that I say with this activity is honor that schedule. Decide, I'm gonna wait for now because we wanna dispel that compulsion. We just wanna stop that compulsion. And just by saying like, you get this, you just don't get it this instant, the goal is that helps diffuse the fear that it's gonna go away or that you can't have it. You do get to have it, you just don't get to have it yet. And then in coming back and honoring it and giving yourself permission to eat that food, when you're more composed, you're giving yourself a gift. You are retraining yourself to eat for the joy of eating. Not because of scarcity, not because you're gonna miss out or something bad's gonna happen, but simply because you can. Because you deserve to enjoy whatever it is you're eating, whenever you're eating it. And over time, if you do this repeatedly, then over time, you train yourself to enjoy your food again. And you train yourself to use food to nourish yourself, and you train yourself that you deserve to have a great experience and that you don't have to punish yourself with binge eating. That is a tactic that I used for me. Like anything, it doesn't just happen overnight. So for me, it started with, I'm gonna let myself have whatever food I want. I'm not gonna deny myself food. So a lot of times, I don't know if you've had this experience, but for me, a lot of times that binging habit came from weeks and weeks of deprivation where I'm like, I cannot have any of this food that might trigger me. And then you just sort of fall off the wagon and suddenly you realize you've actually fallen off a cliff and you have nosedived into the deep end. And so for me, the first step was just saying, no, Sarah, you get to have this food now. And for a while, what that turned into was actually me hoarding the food. Like I might keep the food and it might even go bad at some point and I throw it away. But I needed that psychological boost, that psychological confidence that, no, you get to have this food. Nobody's gonna take it from you. It's not going away. And then in time came the, okay, I'm gonna allow myself now to sit down and eat this food and enjoy it. And step by step, the habit began to turn around. Now, thankfully, I can tell you, binging is just not a part of who I am. That's just not what I do. And so, so if you do have a binge habit, if you do struggle with that, there is a way out. It can be done. And I would invite you to try this activity. Just, when you feel like the itch is coming on and you're getting ready to do it, just stop and tell yourself, I can have this, just not this moment. I'll schedule it for this time. I'll come back and it'll be like a little date for me. If you have a different experience with binging, I'd love to hear about it. Private message me if you want. I know people don't necessarily want to air out their binging habits on comments on Facebook or Instagram. If you have a different experience than that, let me know. And if you try this out, I'd love to know about that as well. I know binging feels very shameful. I know that's how it felt for me, but you are not broken if you're dealing with that. You are a person struggling with a difficult situation is the bottom line. And that, to me, that's human. We all have our struggles.